Hi, I'm Min from Pondered Education. Pondered Education is a creative thinking education provider and consultant. And I have been it has been about a little bit over 10 years that I have been developing that study and learning method and study method, basically learning and teaching method about how to think creatively. And then creative thinking is more likely you can think of like Steve Jobs or Newton and Einstein. They created a new concepts of the meaning that in case of the Steve Jobs, like a iPhone or phones or something like that. In case of the Newton, that artificial satellite, and then the concepts of the gravity, and in case of Einstein, that the relativity theory, and all these things are creative thinking because there was no concepts, the same concepts known before. They were the one that the first started. Now, my background was in science. I got my PhD in biochemistry and biophysics in Washington State University, Pullman, Washington, which is I'm living in the Vancouver area, Burnaby and BC right now, but the Washington State is right on the south from here, right? So it's close from here. Well, close meaning that day trip. If I drive down from here, that probably takes about 10 hours. Then I'll get to the Pullman, Washington, where I got my PhD. After I got my PhD, I moved to New York, which is Weill Cornell Medical School, that is in the Manhattan, together with the Sloan Kettering and Rockefeller, and then those three institutes, which we called the Tri Institute at the time. I'm not sure that it is still the same, but so I did my PhD there. So from I worked up a couple of years, and then my boss at the time, the when I worked there, is right now at the Harvard University, and then I learned how to start the project from her, and then she's very creative and then smart, and I think she is one of the geniuses. After that, I moved to Columbia University. The reason I moved to Columbia University was that at the time when I end of the Whale Cornell Medical School time, that I had a son born with hemophilia. So hemophilia is a very the at the time the hemophilia is a field that really the treatment was really advancing, and then I wanted to be a part of it, so I kind of look for a place where I can start that hemophilia related project. So I looked through, and then one of the professor at Columbia University, which is in the same New York, Manhattan, that agreed that I work for him at the same time I can develop my hemophilia project, and even sent me to the conference with the hemophilia so that I can start. The I spent about 2 years there, working as a lead scientist, leading a team for the structural genomics, and then at the same time, what I did was I developed this project about the hemophilia related, because I never actually studied it before, so I had to collect a lot of information, and after the conference, I have to they organize everything, so it takes quite a time. After well, at the time my wife and I have I have applied the Canadian residency, so immigration. So we did that before our son was born, and then the after the we prepared, and then we drove kind of like the applied, and then we were trying to apply for the U.S. Residency as well, permanent residency as well. And then, but we got the answers from Canada that our the permanent residency has been granted. So we moved to the Canada. After moving to the Canada, I worked as a scientist. I uh, the worked in the National Research Council in Montreal, and at the time, I kind of was offered one of the professor in Concordia University in Montreal that the she can kind of spare some of the space for me to start my project about the hemophilia. So I, with her help, I started the hemophilia project, and we applied a grant, and then it was granted. So we got funding, and then I was able to start with a couple of one master degree student and one undergraduate student, and then started research there. So I was going back and forth. It was not ethical, right? As a permanent residence, that it is not illegal because I worked in the just during the weekend, and then last of the time my students were working, and then we were communicating together. So it was not illegal, but ethically it is not really well acceptable, right? So but problem happened when this as about a year of the research that there, because it is a drug development, and then it is future is more likely uh money is kind of like involved. So the the professor who lended me the lab was kind of going not going well. So uh I had to blow up the project. So and then the department, that department says that they are not gonna touch this project, and I returned the grant, and the remaining grant I asked them to not to fund anymore, and then I just gave up the project, and then I talked to my boss, actual boss in the National Research Council, about this situation and discussed with him, and then he goes like, as he uh, bring up the example. That's the first time I knew that the Steve Jobs is a history. He said, you know, Apple, the Steve Jobs, that when he found Apple, that was his the company, but he didn't start on his own. Because of that, in the middle of uh, the time that Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company that he started. Well, eventually he went back, but that happens, right? And then he told me that that's the reality that I need to see. That because that in this world, if I don't start on my own, then nothing will be. Well, you might lose in a second or something like that. So at I had he gave me some of the this advice, and then I realized that that's the reality. And then, but well, the since I opened up and then I admitted that I it was not ethical, I was not able to stay there longer. Well, even though he didn't say anything. I mean, my boss didn't say, "Ah, you need to leave." He doesn't. He didn't do that. He just didn't say anything, and he didn't get involved in any of my decision. But for myself, that I didn't feel that was not ethical, so I moved to the Vancouver. Once I moved to Vancouver, because my son has hemophilia, we went to the hospital. We visited the hospital many times, and then hospital, the doctor and nurses started noticing he's not different. He's not similar to any other kids. He's different. So he asked us to do some of the autism screening. And then in the end of the autism screening, it was almost in the end, but we had to move. So that took like a several months to go through all these the exams. And then we came to the Vancouver, and then pediatrician looked through and then examined again, and then confirmed that he has autism. From that point, I had to choose what career should I go through, and then I had to think and think, and then I was looking through that the how the education system for the autism, and but I was not able to find any. So I decided that after like thinking over like about a more than a year, I think, just started thinking over and over, I decided to go jump into the education field and then develop teaching and learning method for my son. And then so that's when I started this pondered education. Before the a little after I started developing this study method, and as a developer, problem with it is that there's no income source. So I was looking for the part-time job, and I found the one of the small starting university that they who offered me to teach science there. So I started there, and as I developed this study method for my son to teach my son, now I was able to see the thinking processes, and then I was able to guide my son to start to develop the thinking processes systematically. And at the same time, what I did was that using that same method, I tried to the kind of like adapt to for my class. So I started changing study method, I mean teaching method every single term as my son growing and then changing and then adapt it and then apply it. And then from the students, I get some of the responses and then get it back and develop further for my son. And then it was going back and forth. That took me about 10 years. So I that's how I developed all these teaching method and the learning method. And then as you probably can see, if you go to publication, you will see there's the books that I have published with the journals, and there's a study method that I published in my ones, and then there's some education related articles and other journals that I published several articles and something like that. And these are free to download, except the one that the book chapter of the book that I published with the journal. After with this one, now I organized and I found out pretty much every single issues that in education, why the study method is difficult and why it is challenging, and what makes why the students are struggling, and what is missing in the teaching field and everything. And then these stories that I'm going to share are all from there. You can find from these stories from my blogs from here, that the and then you can connect me from the Facebook, or you can read my these ones. And then I started offering the classes for Korean, but eventually starting from next year I will start offering the classes for the English classes for the English speaking students as well. And then you can contact me from here, or with appointment. If you live nearby, then you can uh, visit my office to discuss, or for the consultation or anything like that. If when the class starts, then you will find that the services and classes that you will it'll be announced in here. So anyway, also that I'm going to put up in here in the notice in here as well. So you can find this later. You can find this information in my website. But eventually, what I'm trying to address here is that this creative thinking, as you can see, that the interior world, that if the Steve Jobs was able to teach other people to think like him, then probably his kids and other people would think like him, right? And if the Einstein was able to think will teach other people think like him, then probably should see a lot of Einstein. But creative thinking, interior world, there is no education system to teach these thinking processes at all. And then the after this part two, I'm going to part moving to the part three and going back to the story that I dealt in the part one. You will see that the really the best of the best is still not able to teach creative thinking. They can teach critical thinking, but not creative thinking. Okay, so I'm going to discuss those stories, and I'm going to share all the methodology. The classes that I'm providing is just training. actual training, just like in school, that you learn how to using that either like a, I usually deal with the scientific topics. So with the scientific topics, just like in science class, but plus you can learn thinking processes. So yeah, your memorization memory will capacity will increase, and you can build this problem solving. You can build creative thinking. You can build critical thinking. Whatever the all the thinking process involved, you can learn about it in the class. But in general idea how to approach, and then you can adapt it and then do it, you can also get it from this website or from these lecture videos as well. And one more thing that I just wanted to suggest is that because I'm releasing all these new methodologies and all these strategies and everything that I have developed for free, I suggest that you can at least chip in some of the contribution in here as well. Okay, so the Canada you can do either, and then the well in the PayPal, this is probably any in the PayPal it just major credit cards are all working in here, so you can contribute in here, and then they will make me keep going on sustain these videos and everything for the future, so that you can learn more about it and then you can adapt it to use it. If you are having difficulties, then you have to come to the classes, but at least you will get some idea, and then differences between the conventional education and then the education that I provide in here. Okay. Right then. Well, I spent the interior part two with my introduction of myself. So I'll continue in part three with this topic that I left from part one.